it's the ultimate sign of just total heedlessness to think that by you doing these things and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these actions, that it was the actions that are getting you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum. There's a story that I go back to from time to time just to remind myself about what it means to be religiously observant and wanting to get closer to God. You know, this idea of what does it mean to be a pious person who is, in the eyes of God, elevated. This story is related in the tradition that two companions from the children of Israel, not like companions in the Sahaba, but two men who were companions to each other. One was a pious one and one was a sinner. The pious one used to remind the sinner every day, you need to get back to God, you need to stop from your sinning, you need to do this and that. At one point, he lost his patience. After so many days of doing this, he lost his patience and he just said, you're going to go into hellfire. That's it. You've basically overstayed your respite with God. God is no longer going to admit you into the garden. When they passed away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God said, who's in response to this? He said, who is this person elevating himself to my status, to my station, declaring who goes into paradise and who goes into hell? In fact, because of that, you, the pious one, are going to go into hell now, and the sinner, you're going to go into heaven. It sounds really arbitrary when you hear the story. Like, what? So you can spend all of your life dedicating yourself to God and go into hellfire, and on the other hand, you could just spend it partying and doing whatever you want and then end up in heaven? That's not what you get from the story. What you get from the story is that there is a real risk of becoming arrogant as you get on the path of righteousness, as you get on the path of becoming a pious person, as you get on the path of wanting to get closer to God. This arrogance of piousness manifests itself in subtle ways that a lot of us don't pay attention to. For example, you see somebody, let's say you go to the masjid, you go on Jum'ah, you attend different functions and events, you pray your 5 daily prayers, and then you know of somebody who's not doing these things. What do? You first of all mention that they're not doing these things, like, oh, this brother or this sister, they're not doing such and such, and she doesn't even wear the hijab, and she doesn't do this, or he doesn't do that, and he doesn't pray, or Ramadan, they didn't even fast. And you mention these things. Basically, their shortcomings, you mention them. And then you follow it up with, may Allah guide them. Or, worse yet, sometimes you, without even mentioning it, somebody's name gets mentioned in a gathering, and then you say, yeah, may Allah guide them. May God guide this person. You've basically created a situation of, first of all, you've identified yourself as a pious person. And second of all, everybody in the gathering, anybody who's heard you say, may God guide this person, is now going to wonder, well, why are you saying that? What are they up to? So you've actually committed an act of backbiting. And they call it the backbiting of righteous people. The backbiting of righteous people is when somebody is mentioned in a gathering, you don't even talk about what they do, but then you just say, may God guide them. Allah yahdi is what you'd say. That right there is actually a manifestation of a situation where, a state that you have of arrogance because of your piousness. You know, the Prophet ﷺ used to, one of the many du'as that he used to make is, and the many praises that he used to make to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, Allahumma laka alhamdu ala husni ibadatik. Allahumma laka alhamdu ala qadri ihsanika wa husni ibadatik. Oh Allah, praise be to you in the amount for all of the things that you've been giving us, the excellent blessings that you've been giving us, and also the ability to worship you in an excellent and a beautiful way. Now that's the Prophet ﷺ thanking God, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for being able to worship Him in such an excellent way. There is nobody that can claim right now, at any time, that they worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better than the Prophet ﷺ. He was the epitome of it. He's al-insanul kamil, the complete human being. And yet, he still worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that he would thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for doing it. Because he recognized that it's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you're in a situation where you're able to go to the mosque, for example. The mosque is Baytullah. It's the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't go to the mosque unless you were invited to the mosque. I'm talking about metaphysical here. The days you don't make it to the mosque is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't invite you. And the days you make it to the mosque, you think you've exercised your free will, you did go out and do it, but you are actually responding in a metaphysical, spiritual way to an invitation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's the ultimate sign of just total heedlessness to think that by you doing these things and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these actions, that it was the actions that are getting you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These actions are supposed to be means. The means to purifying your heart. If your heart starts to have a bit of arrogance towards other people, that you think you're pious, you're somebody who's got it, and they don't, you got a problem. That was actually the first sin. Iblis, his sin, why did he refuse to prostrate in front of Adam alayhi salam? Because he said, أنا خير منه خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. His original sin, the original sin in Islam is not eating from the tree. The original sin in Islam is the sin of arrogance. It is said that there is no spot in the heavens or in the earth except that Iblis has a mark on it where he prostrated. That's how much he worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And where did it get him? So when you see somebody, you know, and like I say, these videos are my way of reminding myself now. When you see people that are in, you know, and not that I saw anybody today, I'm just mentioning this, a thought that I've just had, scattered thought. When you see people that may not have had the opportunity, the blessing of being able to do certain things, first of all, you didn't see everything, you don't know everything, you don't know the state of their heart. I'll finish with a story, actually, because we really don't know. I mean, things appear to you in a certain way. You might look at a sister who's not wearing a hijab or not acting in a particular way that you would think is Islamically approved, or a brother who's, you know, at the club or doing whatever. The story of the prostitute. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that a prostitute entered into paradise for giving drink to a dog. I mean, just think about that. She went into a well, it was hot, she was thirsty, she got some water, she drank. When she came out, there was a dog that was panting from thirst. She goes back down and with her shoe grabs water, gets water for the dog, and the dog drinks. And because of that, she enters into paradise. One key lesson to get from that hadith is that don't judge by the outward. You don't know what's going on in that person's life. You don't know what's happening. You don't know what they're thinking. And more importantly, you don't know what their last day on this planet is going to be like. This person could be a person who's very near and dear and close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it hasn't manifested itself in the world to your eye the way that you think it should have. And on the other hand, somebody could be so far removed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but this person could have all the telltale signs of somebody who should be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the key here is to really focus on yourself. Don't look at everybody else. Don't point the fingers. Every time you point a finger, remember, you got 3 fingers. When you point a finger that way, I've got 3 fingers pointing at me. So it's just a scattered thought I had to share about this. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Assalamu alaikum. So now you've seen some of the videos. I'm going to be trying to post these scattered thoughts, I'm actually going to call it, because they're just scattered thoughts, as often as possible. I'm trying to go for a minimum of 4 times a week, but I'm trying to build this platform on YouTube. So I'm hoping that if you enjoy this content, that you would subscribe, like, comment below, and share this video, and tell your mommy, tell your daddy, tell your pops, tell your grandpa, tell your grandma, tell everybody. If there is any benefit that can be derived from these, I would really appreciate it if you can spread it.